Greetings loves, it is I, Tactical Girlfriend. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody's doing well. Today I'm going to be talking about bug-out bags. Now, this is primarily a firearms channel. I don't really go into bushcraft and survivalism and prepping here, but there is a fairly large overlap between that and the firearms community. I do have my own bug-out bag, so I figured it is high time that I actually kind of dip my toes into this. So primarily today I want to talk about what a bug-out bag is, purpose behind it, considerations that you may want to take for whatever bug-out situation that you might want to prepare for. And I also just want to give you a general show and tell of my own bag so that you have a little bit of inspiration to go off of. So without further ado, let's get into it. Before we get into all the details of bugging out though, I do want to kind of just talk about the difference between bugging in and bugging out. I think realistically, in most emergency and natural disaster scenarios, you're probably going to actually want to bug in. Now that generally just means that you're going to actually stay at home, stay hunkered down, and just make sure that you have supplies on hand to get you by while staying in shelter. Shelter is really important. That's one of the most basic tenets of survival. So if you already have shelter, there's no reason to leave it unless you just can't occupy that shelter. Now, bugging out is where you actually leave your home and go off into the world and try to survive however you think that you might need to. In a bug out situation, you might want to have something like a backpack where you pack bare necessities to get you by for however long that you think you might need. In this case, this is what a bug out bag is. Now, the reason that I made a bug out bag is particularly in anticipation of a natural disaster causing my home to not be habitable. I would need to, in a moment's notice, be on my feet, get out as quickly as I can with the bare necessities, and go somewhere else to find shelter and get through it. This might be next door, this might be miles away, but regardless, I want to be flexible and have the bare minimum supplies to get through it. That's my entire concept behind actually having a bug out bag. Yours might be radically different, but it's really important that you assess your needs, what kind of situations you anticipate, and don't just have a bag full of all sorts of random things just for the sake of doing so. It needs to be tailored around a purpose first. Form follows function here. Now, there's definitely some things that you need to consider when you're choosing a pack. First of all, make sure that it's no bigger than it needs to be. If you get a big pack and you have not as many supplies as you would probably need to fill the whole thing up with, you're going to be really tempted to weigh yourself down with unnecessary items. So get the bare necessities first, understand how much volume that might take up, and then get the pack for it, not the other way around. The second thing is you need to determine how much weight you're going to be carrying in your pack, and that's going to determine the design of the pack that you are going to carry. Obviously, if you're getting a get-home bag and you only need a few things like your water and some bare emergency supplies such as first aid, you can probably just get a day pack. You don't need a giant backpacking backpack that's going to be all floppy because you have only a few items in it. That's not going to be very useful. On the other hand, if you're carrying a lot of weight, yeah, you probably should get something with a frame. That could be an internal frame or an external frame if you're carrying a lot of stuff that's really heavy. Those are all really important considerations to make here. Backpacks also come in all sorts of grades of durability and weight. Usually there's a correlation. Most really durable backpacks are pretty heavy. Most extremely lightweight backpacks are not that durable. Some backpackers really prefer ultralight, myself included. Generally, I really like very light packs with a reasonable amount of durability. You could anticipate that you're going to need something where you're going to be traversing intense terrain and not be on trails and crawling through all sorts of brush. In that case, you might need something a little bit more heavy duty and durable. Always try to get the lightest thing that you can, but obviously weigh in durability too. That's a very important factor. Lastly, you need to make sure that the pack fits you. That's kind of a no-brainer, but a lot of people overlook this. When it comes to larger backpacks especially, they do come in various sizes to accommodate various body sizes and shapes. Make sure that whatever you get is properly fitted to you. Otherwise, you're going to be uncomfortable. The weight's not going to be distributed properly. You got to make sure that your belt that goes around your hip bones is actually going to be going around your hip bones and it's not too high or low, and that the entire pack sits at the right height on your back when adjusted properly. Next, a really important thing that's often understated here is how to properly wear a backpack. First of all, when you're lifting a backpack, make sure that you're lifting it with your knees. Don't use your back. If you throw out your back in general, that's bad, but in a survival situation, that's going to defeat the entire purpose of you ever coming up with a bug-out bag in the first place. So make sure you lift with your knees. Once you got the backpack on, you're going to grab the waist strap, buckle it, and tighten it very nice and snug. From there, tighten the shoulder straps. After that, tighten the load lifter straps up top. Those generally should come down at a 30 to 45 degree angle. After that, you're going to buckle and tighten the sternum strap. Now, obviously, not all backpacks have all of these same buckles and straps, so if you don't have some of these, that's okay. Just omit those steps, but make sure that you're going in the same order when you're making these adjustments. Also, a few things to note when you're going up and downhill, that is actually going to affect how you adjust those straps. If you're going uphill, make sure that your pack is as high and tight as you possibly can get it. You want your center of gravity to be really nice and high as you're traversing the upward incline, so you're not arching your back forward unnecessarily. Also, the opposite applies if you're going downhill. You want your center of gravity to be nice and low and stable, so let those shoulder straps loosen up a bit, let the pack sag a bit, and go downhill from there. Also, if you're traversing long distances with any backpack, it's absolutely imperative that you pack it properly for optimal weight distribution. Otherwise, you're going to unnecessarily weigh yourself down and wear yourself out, and that's going to be the difference between life and death in many situations. So make sure that you're being very methodical here. First of all, lighter weight items that are squishy can go to the bottom of your pack. This can be stuff like a down jacket, this could be your sleeping bag, anything like that can go to the very bottom. That creates a good support for everything that you stack on top of it, and it also provides additional lumbar support. From there, heavier items such as cookware, food, water, all that stuff should be added into the middle of your pack as close to the spine as you can get it. You don't want that weight hanging off the end. You want it as close to your back so that you're not exerting yourself any more than you need to just standing upright. After that, you can add lighter items that you need quick access to, such as a poncho, outer layers, maps, medical supplies, all that stuff really is useful to have in a pinch, and you want quick access to it, and it's also lightweight enough to stack on top, so fill that to the brim. Moving on to the good stuff, let's talk about my bug-out bag. This is the Granite Gear Crown 260. As the name implies, it's a 60-liter backpack. It's fairly minimalist. It's got an internal frame here as opposed to a harder external frame. This one is soft and it actually does distribute weight very well. If you do need to lift heavier weights, I would say probably you want to go with an external frame, but for the kind of weight that this thing is, this is more than adequate and it's very comfortable. It's made out of a very lightweight material, but it's tough enough, I would say. I've taken this thing out many times and it does really strike a good balance for me. It also has this detachable brain here that you can actually wear as a separate pack if you wanted to ditch the rest of this for some reason. I don't know, it's kind of a neat feature. I've gone backpacking with this thing many times and it's served me very well. It serves as a dual purpose backpacking as well as bug-out bag. And a lot of my gear actually is dual purpose. I find that backpacking gear is actually very well suited for my idea of what bug-out situations might bring and what might be appropriate in them. Now let's actually take this thing apart and talk about all the contents in it. First of all, you'll see this large trash bag on the exterior of it. That houses some pretty important stuff that I just simply can't fit inside. And you might be wondering, why isn't it a trash bag? Well, a trash bag actually doubles really well as a bag to put stuff in, of course. In this case, I can stuff it full of leaves if I needed some extra cushioning for whatever I'm doing. It's really nice to have a little bag that you can use as a multi-purpose item. Furthermore, you can also convert it into a poncho in a pinch if you needed to. Speaking of plastic, we have a minimalist ground tarp here. This is basically almost glorified saran wrap, but it does work very well as a ground tarp, keeping you dry from whatever muddy floor that you're going to be sleeping on. Inside that bag, I also have some essentials for my sleep system. First of all, I have my Therm-a-Rest Z Lite folding sleeping pad. This is a really effective sleeping pad because it's lightweight, first of all, and it's got some thermo-reflective material. Really keeps you warm at night. Also, I've wrapped it in this cordage here that is used to secure my sleeping quilt to it. I also have some fiberglass tubing here, which I have elastic cordage that is ran through them, terminated by these little plastic bits for wiring. These are essentially tent support poles. They are used actually in my poncho to make my poncho into a tent. This is a very minimalist approach. Not everybody is going to be crazy about this. It's not the most comfortable thing, but it keeps your gear down to a minimum. You're not carrying a bunch of tent gear. You're doubling up on one item for two different purposes, and it does both very well. On the side of my pack in these pockets here, I do carry 1 liter of water in both, and these are just smart water bottles. You gotta have water. That's a big no-brainer, but I actually chose the smart water bottles because these hook up directly to a filtration system, which I will show you here in a second. I also have a Moore knife here. This is a really basic knife that's made out of plastic. It's got a nice rubber handle so you can use it in the rain, not slip and injure yourself very easily, and it's really lightweight. Is it the most fancy, expensive knife on the market? No, of course not, but this is for bugging out. It's not for continued bushcraft. So obviously, I think that sometimes cheaper is better here, and making sure that things are lightweight and effective is really good. At the very front of this pack, there is also a nice little mesh pocket here. I keep some items I might want some quick access to there. First of all, I do have another trash bag here. Again, you can stuff it with leaves and make some sort of sleeping system with it, or simply just wear it as a poncho. These things can be really handy, and they weigh next to nothing. I also carry some work gloves. Work gloves are extremely important in a survival situation. You do not want to injure your hands when you're doing hard work. You could be crawling through debris. You could be trying to cut down a tree to build shelter. All of that stuff comes down to protecting your hands to ensure your continued survival. These have a really nice thick rubber coating on there. You can get these at a hardware store. You can get really fancy rawhide gloves or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure that you do have some good work gloves. From there, I have a bag for dirty water. This thing slides right off the top here, and you can just open this mouth up and just dip this into a pool of disgusting water or a stream or whatever. Fill it up. You can put purification tablets in here. You can open this end here and filter whatever water you need to get out of there and pour it into an actual water bottle for clean water. You don't want to cross-contaminate. You don't want to drink out of this. You don't want this to be dirty. You want to make sure that you separate those things and have a dedicated dirty water bag or bottle. Another really important item is a rain cover. This thing is all wadded up nice and tight in here. And you can simply just turn this thing inside out and cover your pack in it. And that'll keep your items really nice and dry. You don't want to get everything soaking wet. Even if you're using dry bags, there's inevitably going to be something in there that you forgot to put in a dry bag, and it's going to probably suck for it to get wet. So make sure that you always have a good rain cover. Next, I have my tent stakes. These are for my poncho tents. These are titanium. They're very lightweight. Again, very backpacker oriented, but backpacking and survival in the wilderness are kind of the same thing. So you're going to see a lot of crossover here, and personally, I use a lot of this gear. It's really good to be familiar with your gear. So going backpacking and trying everything out in your bug-out bag is generally a really good practice, and I found that that's really determined what I choose for my backpacking gear as well as my bug-out bag. There I have my ditty bag, basically a nice semi-hermetically sealed plastic bag, in which case I have all the things I need to use in the wilderness to do my business. I've got a very lightweight titanium shovel here for digging a small latrine. You know, I don't think that necessarily for survival situations you're going to be as worried about it, but again, this is also my backpacking backpack, so I do like to have this stuff. If I'm bugging out in an urban environment, I'm probably not going to need these, but I can ditch these in a hurry if I really needed to. And they also weigh almost next to nothing. Also, I've got, of course, camping toilet paper. Obviously, don't forget to wipe. And speaking of not being gross, I've got some hand sanitizer. Next, I have some 550 cord. Now, this is kind of sloppily put together. I don't have it staged, and it's a little braid for quick deployment in different lengths. I just have one long bit of 550. It's actually better this way, I think, because while I normally wouldn't do this, in this situation, it does pack fairly flat. And I don't want to have predetermined lengths because I don't exactly know what kind of situation I'm going to get in and how much I'm going to need. If I have to build a hasty shelter or do something a little bit more extravagant with it, I just want to make sure that I've got plenty of this and all in one piece. Still in the exterior of the backpack, I got these little flappy pockets here on the waist belt. These are useful to have very quick access to items in front of me. And there are some bare essentials there that I do want to go over. First of all, on the left one, I have a water key. This is actually a very underrated piece of gear. I think in any environment where you might have faucets on buildings for sprinkler systems or whatever, there might be untapped water that you can actually get out of it, even if the water is shut off. So having a key that actually gives you access to this in various bolt sizes can actually really help you in a survival situation. You might not need it, but I do kind of think that this might be useful. In the right pocket, I have a headlamp. This one is from Princeton Tech. It's got red and white modes, as well as various brightness settings. It's a really decent headlamp. I've used it plenty. The thing is, when you're in a survival situation, having hands-free illumination can mean a huge difference between life and death, because seeing where you're going while you're walking in the dark, for example, is obviously very important. And having your hands to be able to do other tasks that you might need to is really, really useful. So headlamps, I think, are absolutely a must. I also have a multi-tool. This one is from SOG. It's decent. It's not the best multi-tool in the world, but it is really nice and lightweight. It's got all the bare minimum tools that I think I would probably need in a survival situation. I've used it plenty in the field. It's been really useful. Another really useful item is a list of perishable items and their expiration dates. You want to cycle through all the items in your backpack, make sure that you don't have anything that's going bad. Otherwise, when push comes to shove, you've got some expired items that are completely useless to you, if not outright dangerous to consume. So make sure that you're keeping track of all the medications that you have in your first aid kit. Make sure that all the food items, what have you, is all up to date and fresh and ready to go. Now, in the brain of this pack are some items that I do want very quick access to, because they're right up top and they are lightweight. I have a first aid kit. This is not an IFAK. I'm not anticipating gunshot wounds in a natural disaster. That might be something that you may want to consider, but I kind of just wanted a general boo-boo kit in case I get scraped up or hurt or bit by a snake. Anything like that. I think it's generally better just to have a general first aid kit that's well made for wilderness survival. In here, I also have a navigation package. It's wrapped in plastic to keep it dry, of course. And I got my map for my local area. I've got a pencil in there. Make sure that I'm able to actually mark things on the map, and it's more reliable than a pen, so you can just sharpen it in the field with a knife if you need to, instead of running out of ink. And I also have a map compass. Learn land navigation. It's really important. If you're bugging out over a long distance, you definitely want to keep in mind what kind of terrain that you're going to be traversing and that you're moving about intelligently and that you don't get lost. Also in the brain, I have a keffiyeh. This is an extremely useful multi-purpose item. It's useful for keeping the sun off of you. You can soak it with water to cool yourself down. You can filter sediment through it from your water. You can use it as a sling or as a bandage. It's just all around a really, really good multi-purpose item to have. Now, opening up the main compartment of my pack here, on the very top, I have my poncho. Again, this is part of my sleep system. This is used for constructing a tent basically, and of course keeping myself dry. I want to be able to quickly put this thing on if it comes down to a big rainstorm. I don't want to get soaking wet and catch hypothermia and die, so poncho's really, really good to have. From there, I have this little goodie bag. This thing is full of all sorts of little items. Let me go through it. First, I have my Sawyer filtration system. This basically can plug into my dirty water bag. I can then squeeze the bag and then let the water float through. This filters any sediment out, basically any bacteria, most things like that you would typically encounter in the world around you. That way you can have some safe water to drink. Next, I keep some Katadyn iodine tablets. These will kill all kinds of viruses and bacteria. If you are worried about any sort of viral infections in your water supply, which can happen in various parts of the world, then you probably definitely want to carry something like this. It's just good to also have redundancy. I don't want just a filter. I also want to make sure that that water is absolutely safe to drink, or if my filter, for whatever reason, goes missing, I've got these. One thing I also keep is a sewing kit. This is just some repurposed packaging, but inside of it I have some needle and thread, because if you get a hole in your poncho or your backpack or your coat, whatever you got, you want to make sure that you're not letting moisture in and getting hypothermia from that. Make sure that you're able to repair items in the field and keep yourself going. I also have some folded aluminum foil. This is really useful for cooking. You can wrap all sorts of kinds of items in it or use it as a makeshift tray and put it over a fire and cook yourself a meal. I also got a folding fork and spoon here, really lightweight, aluminum, pretty self-explanatory. I've also got some fire starting materials here. I've got some stormproof matches as well as some Vaseline impregnated cotton. This makes for a really good fire starter. Even in really wet conditions, it's really good to have. I've also got a lighter here that's wrapped in duct tape. That's really good to have. Duct tape obviously is very useful, but carrying a giant roll of it can be just too much and it takes up a lot of space, so it's a lot more efficient to wrap it around some other item. I also carry shoe glue. It's really useful for repairs, obviously, including shoes. It's also really flammable and makes a great fire starter. Also got lip balm. You don't want to get chapped, you don't want to be out in the elements and just be in a bunch of misery. It doesn't take up much space and it doesn't weigh very much. Can make your whole experience a lot better, prevent infections from cracked lips. Generally just really good to have. I also got spare batteries for my headlamp. That's pretty self-explanatory. A bunch of lard bars. These are simple food that are pretty calorie heavy for their weights. Good to have a bunch of these. I've also got a bandana, kind of like the keffiyeh, but if I don't want to get my keffiyeh disgusting and just want to filter out sediment from water, got a dedicated piece of fabric right here for it. I also keep some earbuds here. This is to plug into my radio in case I don't want to just blare it. If I want to listen to things in a more quiet way for whatever reason, have some little earbuds packaged up. This is a really important one, an emergency blanket. It doesn't take up much weight. It's very simple. It's pretty effective. You can combine it with other items to make sure that you don't get too cold. I also got some zip ties in case I'm constructing something and just need to attach things together. These are really a good, lightweight, and simple option. I also carry a phone charger and charging cord. Just because you're in an emergency situation does not mean that the power is necessarily out. If you have to bug out to a different location that has power outlets, make sure that you got a phone charger. Your phone is a really useful tool. Keep it going. I've also got this little Gerber knife. This is just a really nice small utility knife. In case I break another knife, I got this little tiny knife for accomplishing simple tasks. I've also got a Toaks titanium cooking pot here. This is really small. It's not gonna hold a ton of water in it, but it's good enough to get some water boiled. If you need to reconstitute any meals or purify something, this will work in a pinch and it's really nice and lightweight. Inside there, I have my cooking fuel as well as a little folding stove from BRS. These are really nice and lightweight. You can get a few of these for redundancy if you want to. They're not very expensive. And that's basically just my water heating system. I also have yet another water bottle. Water is extremely important to have. You go through this stuff very quickly. It's also really good to have just another water bottle in general. If my dirty water bag gets a hole in it and I can't repair it, it's good to have another dedicated bottle that is just for dirty water. That way you can filter it through here and then have 2 clean ones to carry extra water with you. Now, one of my main sources of nourishment is going to be these Daytrex bars. These are generally kept on life rafts and such. They're more of a maritime intended product, but they're actually pretty good for this because it's kind of the same thing. You're stranded or whatever, you're alone and you need to survive off of some really simple foods. This stuff keeps for a long time. It's very dense and it's packaged very, very tightly, so it doesn't take up very much space in your pack. It's got sugars and fats and carbs and all that good stuff. It's not going to be super nutritious, but it will keep you going for quite a while. I've also got one of these American Red Cross wind-up radio flashlight combos. It's really nice because it doesn't need batteries. I can listen to the radio for emergency information. I can also get handheld illumination, and again, it doesn't use any batteries, so you can use it indefinitely, and that's really useful. In here, I also have a folding wood saw. This thing is a pocket boy. It's actually really, really useful to have these if you're into bushcraft or anything like that. You can cut small trees and limbs down and produce a shelter if you need to. So it's good to be able to use lumber. It's abundant, it's a resource out there, so take advantage of it. Here I have a hygiene kit. Inside of it I have some nail clippers. They may sound really superficial, but in a survival situation it's actually really important. If your fingernails get long, they can get snagged on things, caught on things, they can reduce your dexterity. You can start bleeding, get an infection. The same for your toenails. I've actually had toenails that got too long and got sharp, and they actually rubbed against my toes while I was going on miles-long hikes. And I actually ended up bleeding, and that was just a nasty situation. So nail clippers don't weigh very much. They don't take up like any room. They're really good to have. Also, I do have a travel toothbrush and some baking soda. General hygiene is a really good morale booster, and having your teeth fall out really sucks, so I do kind of recommend having some sort of way to clean your mouth out. From there, I have a dry bag from Sea to Summit. These are really simple and lightweight, and inside of it, I've got my sleep system. First of all, I've got an emergency bivy from Sol. These are really good to have. They're very lightweight. They definitely can save your life. It's good to have some additional insulation if you need it. I've also got a mosquito net. Good to keep the bugs off of you. Don't get malaria. And I've got a whoopee. These are really, really useful for additional insulation. And again, they don't weigh very much. I've also got a little neck gaiter here that you can use as a hood. You can use it as a ski mask. You can tighten it. It's a very good multi-purpose item. I oftentimes use it when I'm camping as a pillow. I can fill it with other items. It's really nice and soft and snuggly. It's nice fleece material. Underneath that, of course, I have another dry bag. In this one, I carry spare clothing. So I've got some wool socks here that are wrapped up in a skivvy with some spare underwear. That way everything is really nice and compact, and I've got something to change into in case I get wet. Wrapped up in there, I also have some spare clothing items. I've got some spare hiking pants. If your pants get wet, you definitely want to replace those quickly and make sure that they're tough and able to be used in all sorts of terrain. Also got a zip-up thermal top here. Really good multi-purpose top. If you're just cold or need to layer up, that's good to have. And some thermal bottoms here. Again, good to layer up, good to have options, and make sure that you stay warm. On the outside of my pack, I keep my sleeping quilt unfurled. Now, you're probably thinking, why isn't it inside your pack ready to go? Well, anything that is sleeping bag or sleeping bag adjacent is not meant to be compressed for extended periods of time. You don't want to keep things in its compression sack for longer than a day generally. It will lose its loft, and that means it loses its ability to keep you warm, and that kind of defeats the entire purpose. If I had to go out the door and I did not have time to pack this, I at least have other items like my emergency bivy, an emergency blanket, my whoopee, extra layers, what have you. Just make sure that you have some redundancy. But whatever you do, don't get your sleeping bag or quilt all packed up in his compression sack and leave it there for years. It's going to be a useless item. You just might as well not carry it at all. Also, right next to my pack, I have my hiking boots. These are just staged and ready to go. You don't want to run out with your dancing shoes in an emergency situation. Having something to bug out in like this is really good. These are rugged, they're tough, they're very comfortable. I can walk miles in these no problem, so make sure you have something similar. Okay, now everything's out of the pack. I do have some closing thoughts for you. First of all, do a gear shakedown. Go hiking with your stuff. Go backpacking. Make sure that you wear your pack, make sure it's comfortable, that it fits you. Go camping with it. Try all the items that you have out. Make sure that you know how to use them, and make sure that they're effective. Whatever you're doing, make sure it works for you, and make sure that you give it a good trial run. I also want to add that in prepping, it's really easy to get carried away and fly off the rails with an extreme individualist mindset. While I think that there is room for individualism and that can be important in certain situations, in most emergencies, that's simply just not really the ticket. There's strength in numbers. A strong community will always outlive a rando starving in the woods. And knowing your neighbors and having friends that you can create a plan with for whatever you're anticipating is going to be far more likely to guarantee your survival. And that wraps up my little ditty on Bugout bags. I'm sure you all have your own opinions and ideas and setups for your own. I'd love to hear more about it in the comments below, so feel free to chime in. Also, if you enjoyed this video or found it useful, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell too. Also want to graciously thank everybody who's supporting this channel on Patreon. I couldn't do without you. This channel is made possible by viewers like you, so if you want to go help chip in, you can always go to patreon.com/tacticalgf. The biggest contributors are named at the end of the video. And I guess the bugs are all out. I really appreciate you all tuning in. Please be good to each other out there. And as always, please take care. Bye!